My name is Evelyn Ross. In my family, I was always the background sister, not the wild one or the funny one, not the golden child with the pageant photos on the wall. I was the one who quietly loaded the dishwasher while everyone else laughed in the living room. The one whose birthdays got forgotten, whose achievements never made it to the fridge. At some point, I stopped expecting anything different. It wasn't that they didn't love me. It's just that I was easier to ignore. I learned early that the quieter I was, the more comfortable everyone felt. When you grow up being invisible, you start to believe that maybe you were meant to be. I got good at not taking up space, at keeping my voice low, at letting others fill the silence. I became what they needed me to be: easy, forgettable, harmless. My younger sister Rachel was the star. She had the spotlight, the applause, the Instagram perfect life. My brother Matt was the joker, always finding a way to get a laugh, even when he failed out of school or lost another job. And me? I was just Evelyn, the one who did something in logistics, I think, somewhere near a base, according to my dad. At family gatherings, I was often the extra chair, the one you asked to take the group photo so I wouldn't be in it. My mom would say things like, "Not everyone likes attention," as if that excused how they never gave me any. I used to wonder if they even knew what I did for a living. They didn't ask, so I didn't tell. Not really. When I joined the Navy at 18, no one came to my boot camp graduation. My mom sent a card that said, "Be safe." My dad didn't call, and somewhere along the way, I stopped minding. I let their lack of curiosity become my armor. But silence has a way of collecting weight. It grows heavy when no one ever asks where you've been or what you've seen, when the only time they notice you is when you're not there. I carried that weight for years, through deployments, through losses, through moments when I was sure I wouldn't make it. And every time I returned home, I slipped back into the role they gave me, the quiet one, the helper, the one who keeps her head down, until last Thanksgiving in Houston. Until the night with the pizza and the napkin and the man sitting at the end of the table. Until the moment, my silence wasn't small anymore. It was the loudest, most dangerous thing in the room. The night it all shifted was loud. The kind of loud that covers tension, with fake laughter and too much wine. We were all packed around the same old table at my parents' house in Houston, passing slices of greasy pizza and clinking mismatched glasses like we were still the same family. Rachel had brought someone new this time. Lieutenant Luke Callahan, a clean-cut guy with sharp posture and a quiet confidence that didn't quite match the rest of the room. I was seated near the end, half out of the conversation as usual. My glass was empty. No one noticed. Rachel was mid-story. Something about an ER patient who mistook her for a doctor. Everyone laughed a little too hard. She had a way of making herself the main character, even when she wasn't. Then it happened. A napkin dropped to the floor. I didn't even see whose it was, but Rachel looked right at me and said, "Evelyn, can you grab that? Might as well be useful." She said it with a smile, the kind that passes for playful if you're not paying attention. But I was paying attention. I bent down without a word and picked it up. My fingers moved slowly, deliberately. I could feel every eye not looking at me. I handed the napkin to her. She didn't even say thanks. That's when he stood up. Rachel's boyfriend, Luke. Tall, crisp haircut, steady eyes. He rose so quietly, it took a second for anyone to notice. Then, he looked directly at me, squared his shoulders, and nodded once. "Commander Ross," he said. "Ma'am." The room stopped. A fork paused, mid-air. My brother's drink hit the table with a soft thud. My mom's jaw went slack. Even Rachel blinked, like she couldn't process what she'd just heard. I didn't say anything. I just looked at him, held his gaze like a mirror. He stood there, still as stone, waiting for a signal. My hand was still holding the napkin. "Ma'am," he said again, quieter this time, but with even more weight. You could feel the air shift. Like gravity had changed directions. My dad opened his mouth, then closed it. Rachel's face flushed, but she tried to laugh. "What's going on?" she said, forcing a smile. You two know each other? He didn't answer right away. He looked back at me like he was seeing someone he hadn't expected to meet. Someone he wasn't sure he was allowed to question. We served together, he said. I was under her command during the Kandahar extraction. She is my former commanding officer. His voice didn't waver. Silence again. The kind that doesn't know where to settle. It just hangs there, cutting through every memory they thought they had of me. Rachel stammered something about miscommunication. My mom finally asked, "Evelyn, is that true?" I nodded once. No theatrics. No apology. Just a quiet, "Yes." "He's joking, right?" my brother said, already trying to laugh it off. "Commander? Like Navy stuff?" "He's not joking," I said. For the first time in years, they looked at me. Really looked. Not through me. Not past me. But at me. And they didn't know who they were looking at. The guy's name was Lieutenant Luke Callahan. I'd trained him 3 years earlier, signed off on his first mission brief, and sent him into a field where he almost didn't make it back. He knew exactly who I was, and now, so did everyone else. The woman they forgot to ask about. The one they thought ran spreadsheets in a quiet corner. The one who just picked up a napkin. Rachel's voice cracked slightly as she asked, "Why didn't you ever tell us?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted the silence to do the talking, because sometimes, silence says more than words ever could. Luke sat down slowly. The rest of the table stayed quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't come from peace. It comes from reckoning. That dinner was never about pizza. It was a fault line, and that night it finally cracked. I was 18 when I left for boot camp. No one came to see me off. No one showed up when I graduated. I remember standing in line that day, surrounded by families holding signs and waving flags. I looked for my parents in the crowd, even though I knew they weren't there. Later, I found a card in my mail locker. It said, "Hope it's going well," in my mom's handwriting, and inside was a $5 bill folded in half. My dad didn't mention it at all. When I called the house the next week, he said, "How's the office work treating you?" He thought I was filing for the VA. I didn't bother correcting him. That became a pattern. I'd try to tell them where I was, what I was doing. They'd nod and change the subject. My brother once asked if I still had to fold towels all day, like I was working in a gym, not a forward operating base in the Middle East. Rachel would say things like, "At least your job is safe." Even when I was deployed overseas, the more I tried to share, the more I saw their eyes glaze over. Eventually, I just stopped. It wasn't that I didn't want to be seen, I just got tired of being misheard. Every conversation felt like shouting into a well and listening to them cheer for the echo, so I chose silence. Not because I had nothing to say, but because it was the only thing they'd never try to rewrite or diminish. They liked me small, quiet, easy to ignore. That version of me made them feel stable, like the world still made sense. And for a long time, I let them believe that's who I was. But silence isn't surrender. It's survival. It's a shield. It let me build something real without them picking it apart. Every deployment, every promotion, every award they never knew I earned, I carried in that silence. Not for secrecy, for strength. Because if they weren't going to see me clearly, then I'd rather not be seen at all. Until that night at the table. When everything they thought they knew finally cracked. Most of my missions never made the news. Some didn't even exist on paper. That was the nature of my work, and I liked it that way. I served for over 15 years. I specialized in strategic operations, often behind enemy lines, coordinating extractions and intelligence logistics that only a handful of people were cleared to see. I wore uniforms with no name tags and carried credentials I couldn't show to anyone outside the wire. There were medals, a Distinguished Service Medal, a Joint Operations Valor Citation, but they sat in a drawer because no one at home ever asked, and I had no reason to explain. I led teams through snow-covered terrain where no signal reached. I briefed senior command on threats that could collapse governments. And somehow, I came back every time to a family that still thought I worked somewhere near a base. My mother once told a friend I worked in inventory. My father assumed I was in HR. They didn't say it to hurt me. They just never cared to ask more. And after a while, I stopped offering answers. Their ignorance became a kind of freedom. The less they knew, the more space I had to become who I needed to be. I learned how to lead without needing applause, how to make decisions no one would ever thank me for. In that silence, I built a life on grit and clarity. I saw what mattered. Who showed up? Who didn't? I found strength in staying quiet, while others filled rooms with noise. They thought I was invisible because I didn't brag, because I didn't explain. But silence isn't absence. It's a choice. My job demanded I hold back. My life required it. So I let them believe what made them comfortable, while I kept doing the work that kept people safe. And that quiet power, that steady presence they all overlooked, turned out to be the most dangerous thing in the room. They just didn't know it yet. It started with a phrase I heard at a military symposium. Rachel, a civilian analyst but aiming for a high-level government role, was presenting on strategic humanitarian logistics. I heard her describe a key doctrine, the Spectre Doctrine, with my exact language, the one I had only published internally on a secure Navy channel. I checked the public access logs. The report wasn't classified, but it was restricted. Rachel had accessed my low-level, unclassified reports on Arctic Deployment Unit Bravo repeatedly through a generic contractor account. She hadn't hacked me. She had found the breadcrumbs I had left exposed for general logistics reference. She wasn't a spy. She was a thief of intellectual property, cloaking her ambition in my achievements. By then, I knew what she was doing. Rachel was building a promotion packet based on my work, leveraging my expertise without attribution. She'd used details from my Arctic campaign under a humanitarian header in her own name. I could have shut it down right then, reported the breach, filed the complaint. But I didn't. Not because I was scared, because I wanted her to think she got away with it. I wanted her to feel untouchable, to strut into every room like she earned what she stole. I watched her soak in praise that wasn't hers. I let her believe I was too quiet to notice, because silence is a strategy. It holds until it breaks. And I knew the moment would come when the silence wouldn't just end. It would echo. She had no idea I was watching, no idea I was documenting every quote, every reused phrase, every file pinged from an unauthorized terminal. She didn't just steal from me, she weaponized my invisibility. Rachel built a career on borrowed valor, smiled through interviews with my words behind her eyes. And the irony? She still introduced me to others as her retired sister, the one who used to work somewhere on base. I let her shape the story because I was shaping something else the moment she wouldn't see coming. I didn't want revenge. That's too small. What I wanted was clarity, consequences, the kind that doesn't arrive with a shout, but with a silence so sharp, it cuts the room in half. Tonight was that moment. She invited me, thinking I'd play my usual part. Quiet. Background. Maybe useful. But she forgot one thing. I don't raise my voice to be heard. I wait until the room is listening. He didn't recognize me right away. Lieutenant Callahan sat 2 seats down from my father, halfway through his second beer, nodding politely as Rachel recounted stories that weren't entirely hers. But when I spoke, really spoke, something shifted in his eyes. I said just one phrase quietly. Kandahar extraction strategy. His fork hit the plate. The sound cracked through the room louder than it should have. He turned, slow, like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. His gaze swept across my face, pausing, studying. Then he stood, steady and sharp. And for the first time in years, someone at that table looked at me with full recognition. Commander Evelyn Ross, he said, clear and formal, ma'am. And then, without hesitation, he saluted. The silence was instant. Not awkward, not confused. It was stunned. My mother's hand hovered mid-air over her wine glass. My father blinked, as if he were trying to place me in a memory that never existed. Rachel's face went pale, then flushed, then frozen. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I didn't say a word. I didn't have to. Callahan lowered his hand and repeated his statement to the room. Commander Ross trained me in advanced reconnaissance. She's the one who signed off on the Kandahar extraction strategy that saved my entire team. Rachel finally found her voice, sharp and panicked. Luke, you're mistaken. She works. She works in logistics. She told us. I held Rachel's gaze, steady and calm. You knew enough to quote my field strategies, Rachel. You didn't need a name. You just needed a promotion. The accusation was quiet, but it hit like a thunderclap, Rachel stammered, her eyes darting between me and Luke. I don't know what you're talking about. Callahan stepped toward me, but his words were directed at Rachel. Ma'am, he said, using the title that was now a weapon against her. When you told me about your upcoming briefing and quoted the Spectre Doctrine, I knew who wrote it. You didn't just use her words, Rachel. You used her life. No one defended her. Not this time. My mother's eyes dropped to her lap. My father looked straight ahead, like he couldn't process what the room had become. Callahan stepped toward me. Ma'am, he said again, softer now. You trained me. I owe my career to your leadership. I nodded. Once. Just enough. For the first time, they saw me. Not as the quiet one. The helper. The extra chair. They saw the woman who had led operations they'd never be cleared to understand. And I let them sit in it, because this wasn't about proving anything. This was about being seen. And for once, the truth walked in before I had to. The door closed behind me without a sound. I stepped out into the night, the air cool against my skin, the porch light casting long shadows across the driveway. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady, like it had finally caught up to itself. No one followed me. No one called my name. I walked to my car like I'd done it 1,000 times before. But this time, every step felt like a release. I didn't start the engine right away. I sat there in the quiet, staring through the windshield as the house glowed behind me like a stage, long after the audience had left. For the first time in years, I felt nothing dragging behind me. Then I reached into the glove compartment. The letter was still there, tucked beneath old receipts and a flashlight with dying batteries. The envelope had yellowed with time. The corners are soft from being handled but never opened. My grandmother had written it the year she passed. I hadn't been ready to read it then. Maybe I needed tonight to finally deserve her words. I peeled back the tape slowly, careful not to tear anything. The paper inside was smooth and worn, the ink slightly faded. But the words hit fresh. Evelyn, I see you. I always did. I saw the way you used your quiet like a wall against them. I know why you did it. My breath caught. I hadn't even realized I was holding it. You are steel wrapped in silence. Not because you don't feel, but because you feel too much to waste it on those who won't hear. They called you quiet. I call you anchored. They called you invisible. I call you forged in the space they left empty. I leaned back in the seat, the letter trembling slightly in my hands. Don't let their comfort shrink your strength. You don't owe them volume. You owe yourself truth. That was the part that undid me. Not in a broken way. Just enough to feel stitched together by someone who saw all the things they missed. I folded the letter carefully and placed it on the console beside me. Outside, the neighborhood was still. Not silent from avoidance, but earned stillness. The kind that feels like peace. I turned the key in the ignition and didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew who I was now. And more importantly, I remembered that someone always did. There was no parade waiting for me when I got back to base. Just the sound of my boots on the pavement and the low hum of a generator nearby. That was enough. I unpacked slowly. Each box is a small chapter of a life I built far away, from spotlights and family photos. At the bottom of one crate was a medal I had never displayed. I placed it in a drawer beside my grandmother's letter. Not for show, for remembrance. That night, I sat outside my quarters, letting the cold air settle on my skin. There was no sense of triumph, no craving for recognition. Just a quiet release, like my body had finally exhaled after years of holding something in. I thought about Rachel, about the silence that followed. Not hateful, just final. Some distances don't need to be closed. I thought about my mother's voicemail, the invitation for coffee, the half-hearted reach. Across years of erasure, I never saved the number. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I didn't need anything more from her. Some doors don't slam shut. They just stop being doors. I spent the following weeks in rhythm. Work, rest, and walks near the north fence line. The sky stretched wide, like it was finally making space for who I had become. There was no rush to explain myself, no urgency to be understood. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was choosing who got to see me. Silence had always been part of me. People confused it for weakness. They didn't know it was where I held my sharpest thoughts. It was never a surrender. It was a strategy. It was strength measured in presence, not volume. And now, with no one left to prove anything to, I finally understood its power. The real kind. The kind that walks into a room without apology and leaves without regret. I am not the background. I was never the extra. I was the storm they never saw coming. And I didn't need to raise my voice to make them listen. I just had to wait for the moment when the silence stopped protecting them and started protecting me.